By the time the crabapple trees dropped their petals in late May, Pell would be sleeping on the foot of Vera Callum's bed every single night. But on the Tuesday afternoon, she first saw him, sitting 3 steps behind her on the sidewalk on North Walnut Street, as though he had somewhere important to be and had simply chosen her direction. Vera did not slow her stride. She did not speak to him. She told herself quite firmly that he was someone else's cat. She was wrong about that. She was wrong about several things that spring. Vera had spent 34 years as a hospital social worker at Methodist University Hospital in Indianapolis. She had sat with people in rooms where the light was never quite right, too bright for bad news, too dim for hope, and she had done what that work required, listening, advocating, locating resources, finding the precise words that could open a door in a person who had locked everything down from the inside. She was good at it. She was, if she was honest, exceptional at it. And she had known, for the last decade of her career, that she was running on the reserve tank. The work had not worn her down. It had worn through her, the way water wears through stone, slowly, without drama, until one morning you press your hand to the place where the solidity used to be and find only the thinnest edge remaining. She retired at 65. The party was generous. Her supervisor, a careful man named Arthur, who cried when she expected it and did not cry when she did, had said she was the best the department had ever had. She had thanked him and meant it and gone home to her apartment in Indianapolis and sat in her kitchen and eaten a bowl of cereal for dinner because she could not think of a single thing she wanted to cook. 6 months later, her daughter Prue had called with the idea. Bloomington, Indiana, 2 hours south. A university town, which meant bookstores and a good library, and the particular low hum of a place where people were always in the middle of thinking something. Prue lived there with her husband and their 2 boys, and there was a rental cottage available on the north side of town, 3 blocks from the farmer's market, with a front porch and a small yard, and a landlord named Gerald, who kept bees and did not mind cats, though Vera did not own a cat and had not mentioned wanting one. "You need a change," Prue had said. "I'm fine," Vera had said, which was the sort of thing that sounds like an answer and is not. She moved in March. The cottage was smaller than her Indianapolis apartment, but better proportioned, with windows that caught the morning light in a way that made her feel on the first morning as though something was being offered. The dogwood in the backyard had not yet bloomed. The sidewalks were still carrying the last of the winter grit. She unpacked her boxes in order, kitchen, then books, then bedroom, which was how she did most things, in the sequence that made the most sense, without ceremony or delay. The first month, she established routines. This was not hard. Routines were what remained when everything else had been structured around other people's needs. She walked in the mornings, east on East 3rd Street and north on North Walnut, a loop of about 2 miles that took her past the Victorian houses with their covered porches, through the blocks where the graduate students lived on bicycles, back around past the co-op grocery that smelled of bulk grains and citrus. She cooked dinner from scratch 5 nights a week, which she had not done in years, not properly. She volunteered 2 mornings a week at the Monroe County Public Library in the children's reading program, which was not the same as hospital social work, but used enough of the same muscles that she felt useful and not lost. She was not lost, she told herself. She was, at most, slightly between things. The habit she noticed, the one that made her understand that something was still off-center, was this. Every morning when she walked, she caught herself scanning. Not for anything specific, just scanning. The way a social worker scans a hospital corridor, reading posture, reading faces, looking for the person who needed something and had not yet found the words to ask. She had done it for 34 years, in rooms and hallways and parking structures and family waiting areas. She was doing it now on a sidewalk in Bloomington, Indiana, among graduate students on bicycles and retirees walking dogs. And nobody needed anything from her, and her hands had nothing useful to do with themselves. She was, without knowing it, still waiting to be necessary. That was the wound, not dramatic, not deep in any way she could point to. Just a persistent, low weight, the sense that she had been built for a purpose that had now concluded, and no one had told her what came next. The day Pell followed her home, Vera had been to the library for her Tuesday shift, and had stopped at the farmer's market on her way back, even though the spring market had just reopened and the stalls were still sparse. Early radishes, a few bunches of asparagus, seedlings for the kitchen garden she kept telling herself she would plant. She bought a bunch of asparagus and a small pot of basil and walked home through the block of Dutch colonial houses north of 10th Street, where the crabapple trees were just opening their pink blossoms and dropping the first of their petals onto the sidewalk in a way that was, she thought, almost too much. Too much, like a thing someone had arranged to be beautiful on purpose. She was 3 blocks from her cottage when she first heard the sound behind her. Not footsteps exactly, something lighter, a soft, regular placement of weight on pavement that had a pattern to it. Not random, not the tentative approach of a lost animal, but steady and deliberate, maintaining a distance behind her that did not change. She looked back. He was there, a brown and cream tabby, compact, with a broad head and eyes the color of strong tea. He was walking, not scurrying, not trotting with the frantic energy of a hungry stray. Walking at a measured pace, about 6 feet behind her, in the same direction, with the air of a creature that had made a decision and saw no reason to reconsider it. Vera stopped. He stopped. She regarded him. He regarded her. "You have somewhere to be," she said, which was not really addressed to the cat, but was the thing her brain produced when it was evaluating a situation and not yet ready to arrive at a conclusion. He sat down, on the sidewalk. In the same composed way, a person might sit down to wait for a bus, not distressed, not demanding, simply settled, with his tail wrapped around his front feet and his attention fixed on her with a quality she could not immediately classify. She walked on. He followed. He followed her for 3 full blocks, through the intersection at 13th Street, where the traffic light took a long time, maintaining his 6-foot distance, never hurrying, never dropping back. When she turned up her front walk, he stopped at the foot of it on the public sidewalk and sat down again. Vera stood on her porch and looked at him. He looked at her. "I am not feeding you," she said. He did not appear concerned. She went inside. He was there the next morning when she left for her walk, sitting on the bottom porch step, not on the private property of the step itself, but on the concrete edge of it, which she noted because she was the sort of person who noticed distinctions like that. He did not ask for anything. He stood up when she came out, walked with her to the end of the front walk, stopped, and watched her go. He was there when she came back, in the same spot. This happened for 3 days before Vera admitted to herself that something was occurring. On the 4th day, she sat down on the front steps. She was wearing her gardening clothes and had not yet started the gardening, and she looked at him levelly, the way she used to look at patients who had not yet told her the real thing they were dealing with. "Where do you live?" she asked. He was close enough now that she could see his coat clearly. He was well fed, no visible injuries, coat in good condition. Not a stray in any conventional sense, no collar. But his behavior was not the behavior of a cat that lived without human contact. He moved with the ease of an animal that trusted proximity to people. He simply did not appear to belong to any specific person. She reached out slowly, and he stretched his broad head forward and pressed it against her fingers, once with some pressure, then he withdrew, as though having confirmed something. "All right," she said to no one in particular. That afternoon, she called the number for Monroe County Animal Control and described him. No reports of a missing brown tabby in that area. She put a photograph on the neighborhood social media page. 3 days passed. No response. On day 7, she bought a bag of cat food. She put a bowl on the porch. He ate without ceremony and then sat on the porch step and washed his face, and Vera stood in the doorway and watched him and felt something she had not felt in some time. Not useful exactly, but proximate to it. The satisfaction of having identified a need and addressed it. Small, almost embarrassing in its smallness. Not embarrassing. She stopped herself. Not embarrassing, just new. She named him on the 8th day, without intending to. She had been writing a grocery list at the kitchen table and had written in the margin without thinking about it. Pell. She stared at the word for a moment. It was the name of the street near the hospital in Indianapolis where she used to eat lunch in better weather, sitting on a bench outside a bakery. She had not thought about that bench in years. She had been happy there, she realized, sitting in the sun with a sandwich and 45 minutes that belonged entirely to herself and to no one waiting for anything. She crossed out the word and then uncrossed it. "Pell," she said, testing it. From the porch, as though the door were not there, came a single brief sound. She let him in. He entered the cottage the way he entered everything, without haste, without drama, with the careful, systematic attention of a creature conducting a thorough assessment. He walked the perimeter of the kitchen. He stopped at the threshold between the kitchen and the small living room, holding perfectly still for a moment, ears forward, reading whatever a cat reads in the air of a place. Then he walked through. He did not jump on the furniture. He looked at the couch from a distance, as though evaluating whether it met certain standards, and then stepped up onto the cushion at the far end and sat down. He looked at Vera. She sat down at the other end of the couch. They were quiet together for a while, in the early evening, with the sound of birds coming through the open window and the dogwood casting its long shadow across the backyard. She had not sat like this, just sat, with no task and no emergency and no one to help, in longer than she could easily trace. ACT 2. Pell had been in the cottage for 10 days when the landlord's concern arrived. Gerald Tabb was a deliberate man in his mid-60s who wore canvas hats and kept 12 hive boxes along the south fence of the property, and who had told Vera when she moved in that he did not mind cats. He had not elaborated on what mind cats meant exactly in the context of a rental agreement, and Vera had not asked because the question had not been relevant at the time. It was relevant now. Gerald appeared on a Wednesday morning while Vera was on her porch with coffee, and Pell was sitting on the porch railing with the particular proprietorial ease of an animal who had decided that the railing belonged to him. "Morning," Gerald said from the garden gate. "Morning," Vera said. Gerald looked at Pell. Pell looked at Gerald with the frank, unhurried gaze that Vera had come to understand meant he was gathering information and had not yet reached a conclusion. "I said I didn't mind cats," Gerald said carefully. "I just want to be sure about the bees." Vera had not thought about the bees. Gerald explained, with the gentle but thorough manner of a man who loved something and was worried about it, that a cat showing significant interest in the hive boxes could interfere with the colony's behavior. Bees were sensitive to disturbance. They were sensitive to predators near the entrance. A cat who decided the south fence was hunting territory could cause the hive to become defensive, which would be bad for the bees and possibly for the cat, and definitely for anyone walking near the south fence. Vera said she understood and would keep Pell away from the south fence. She said this with confidence. She was not sure she had the authority to make such a promise. That afternoon, she watched Pell from the kitchen window. He had been on the back porch, sitting in the sun. Now he had moved down into the yard, along the flower bed, and was walking, slowly, with his nose down, in the direction of the south fence. "Pell," she said through the screen door. He paused. One ear swiveled in her direction, acknowledging the sound while not committing to its instructions. He took 3 more steps toward the fence. "Pell." He stopped, looked back at her. Then, with a composure that struck her as both infuriating and slightly magnificent, he sat down in the middle of the yard, equidistant between the porch and the south fence, and began washing his ear. Vera exhaled. She was going to need a plan. She bought a motion-activated sprinkler online that evening and installed it near the south fence boundary the next morning with the help of a tutorial video on her laptop, which she watched 3 times because the first 2 times she was also watching Pell, who watched the installation process from a safe distance with an expression of professional skepticism. The sprinkler worked. Pell was deterred from the south fence within 2 days, which he demonstrated by taking up a new position on the porch railing from which he could observe the fence without approaching it, in the posture of a general who has been asked to withdraw but has not been defeated. Gerald, on a subsequent morning, noted the sprinkler and nodded at Vera with a respect she found disproportionate but genuinely pleasing. "Good solution," he said. "He's strategic," Vera said. "You have to think ahead of him." Gerald almost smiled. "The bees are like that too." It was the most words they had exchanged, might say. The complication Vera had not anticipated was not the bees, it was her daughter. Prue arrived on a Saturday in early June with her 2 sons, Kai and Ren, who were 7 and 9 and had the particular energy of children who had been in a car for 2 hours and had now been released onto a front porch. Prue had not been told about Pell. This was not a decision Vera had made consciously. She had simply not mentioned him. Prue walked through the front door, set her bag down, and said without preamble, "There is a cat on your couch." "Yes," Vera said. "You have a cat." He followed me home. Prue turned to look at her with the expression she had been perfecting since adolescence, the one that meant she knew a great deal more about what was happening than she was being told. "Mom," she said. "He had nowhere else to be," Vera said. "I looked into it. You named him." "His name is Pell." From the couch, Pell opened one eye. He regarded Prue with the measured assessment he applied to most newcomers and then, apparently satisfied, or at least not unsatisfied, closed it again. Kai, who was 7 and had no caution about anything, immediately crossed the room and sat down next to Pell on the couch. He did not pet him. He simply sat next to him with the instinctive social intelligence of a small child, leaving a hand loosely available on the cushion between them. Pell sniffed the hand. Then he pressed his head against it once, briefly, and Kai's face was briefly the face of someone who has been given something significant. "He likes me," Kai said. "He's making his mind up," Vera said. Prue watched all of this with an expression that had moved, without her entirely choosing, from skeptical to something softer. "How long has he been here?" she asked. 3 weeks approximately. "Are you going to keep him?" Vera considered this question. She had been, she realized, not considering it. She had been existing in a state of tactical daily management that did not require answering larger questions. She had bought cat food. She had installed a sprinkler. She had noted, in the margin of her grocery list, a name. None of these were decisions exactly. "Yes," she said. She surprised herself. She surprised Prue too, who was quiet for a moment, and then said simply, "Good." Deuce. The harder afternoon came 2 weeks later. Vera had a habit, not one she had named, not one she examined, of taking a particular route on her morning walks that avoided the east side of Bloomington near the Indiana University campus where the medical school was located. She was not sure when she had started taking the longer route. She was not sure she had ever decided to. She just went the other way. On a Friday morning in mid-June, Pell did something he had not done before. He followed her out, not to the end of the walk and back this time. He came down the porch steps and walked with her onto the sidewalk. She stopped and told him to go back. He sat down on the sidewalk and looked at her with the particular quality of attention he used when he had no intention of complying. "You cannot come on the walk," she told him. He considered this. He walked to the corner of North Walnut and East 13th and stopped there, sitting on the corner, watching her. She went the usual way. When she came back 40 minutes later, he was still at the corner. He stood up when he saw her. He walked back to the cottage alongside her without incident. But the next morning, he was at the corner again before she reached it. And the next. On the 4th morning, she tried a different route. She turned right instead of left at 13th, east instead of west, toward the campus, toward the medical school buildings that stood in their particular institutional way with their brick and their parking structures and their smell, on certain mornings when the wind came from the right direction, of something antiseptic and clinical that she had spent 34 years knowing. Pell walked beside her. She slowed down. She slowed down. She had not been on this side of town in the 3 months she had lived in Bloomington. She had not thought about why. She thought about it now, walking past the University Arboretum with its signage for the plant collection, past the medical science building with its revolving door, catching the morning sun, past the parking structure where a security guard in a yellow vest was directing an early arrival. She had retired. That was a fact. She had retired from a building like this one, from rooms like the ones behind those windows, from work that had made her necessary for 34 years. And she had walked away from that building on a Friday afternoon in October with a sheet cake box under one arm and a gift certificate to a garden supply store, and no idea, in any real sense, of what she was walking toward. She had been avoiding this. Not the campus specifically, the shape of what it recalled. The reminder that she had been, for all of those years, defined entirely by her usefulness to other people, and that the usefulness had now concluded, and that she did not know what she was in the absence of it. She stopped walking. Pell stopped beside her. He did not look at the buildings. He looked at her. His broad head turned, and his tea-colored eyes found her face, and he simply held that gaze with the patience he brought to most things. She stood there for a while on the sidewalk near the Arboretum in the warm June morning, with the red buckeye trees heavy with leaf on both sides of the path, and the sound of the city waking up around her. Then she started walking again, not back, forward, through the campus and around the other side, past the fine arts building, past the fountain in the middle of the quad, where a department had set up chairs for some kind of outdoor meeting. She walked the full loop, back to North Walnut, back through the neighborhoods with their crabapple trees, the petals long gone now, the green fruit just beginning, back to the cottage. Pell walked with her the entire way, at his measured pace, never pulling ahead. She climbed the porch steps. He climbed them beside her. She sat down. He sat down next to her, closer than usual, with his shoulder nearly against her knee. She did not cry exactly. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and breathed for a while and let the morning settle around her. The practical crisis arrived in July. Vera had taken Pell to the vet in late June, a clinic on South Henderson Street, a woman named Dr. Yavanna Reese, who was brisk in the way of people who respected both their time and yours. Pell had submitted to the examination with resignation. He had been vaccinated. He had been pronounced healthy, approximately 3 or 4 years old, well-fed, not neutered. Not neutered. Dr. Reese had mentioned this with the tone of someone noting an obvious next step. Vera had said she would think about it, which was the sort of non-answer she had not used in her professional life and was apparently still capable of producing in her personal one. She thought about it, and while she was thinking, July arrived with its Indiana humidity, and Pell began behaving differently. He was restless in the evenings. He went to the back door and asked to be let out at hours when he had not previously asked to be let out. He paced. He sat at the window with his body alert and his attention fixed on the middle distance with an intensity that was new and different from his usual focused calm. He made sounds, low and intermittent, that were not distress exactly, but were not comfortable either. He was, as Dr. Reese had politely predicted, finding the walls of the cottage insufficient. On a Wednesday night in the second week of July, Vera woke at 2 in the morning to a sound she could not immediately place. She lay still and listened. The sound was coming from the front of the cottage, from the living room. A low, rhythmic pressing against the door, not scratching, but a steady, deliberate push of weight against the wood, repeated every few seconds. Patient, persistent. Not desperate, but completely, utterly clear. Vera got up. She stood in the doorway of the living room, in the dark. Pell was at the front door, both front paws pressed flat against the lower panel, body leaning forward, exerting steady pressure as though the door might eventually consent to open through sheer reasoning. He heard her. He stopped and looked at her over his shoulder. She could have let him out. She understood that. He would probably have come back. But she stood there for a long moment and thought about the coyotes she had seen noted on the neighborhood page and the cars on 13th Street that did not always slow down, and the fact that she had become, without planning to, a person who needed this particular animal to be on the inside of the door. "Not tonight," she said. He looked at her for another moment. Then he turned and walked without resentment toward the couch and jumped up and settled at the far end, his back to her, his tail wrapping slowly around himself. She sat down on the other end. They were both quiet for a while, in the dark, in the middle of the night. "I'll call Dr. Reese in the morning," she said. Pell's ear moved. Just the one. She was not sure if that was agreement. It felt like it. She called Dr. Reese in the morning. The appointment was made for the following Tuesday. Vera drove Pell in the carrier. He was not pleased about the carrier, which he communicated with a sustained, low commentary during the 10-minute drive that stopped the moment she reached over and placed her hand flat on top of the carrier on the passenger seat. And Dr. Reese handled everything with her usual matter-of-fact competence. Pell came home drowsy and indignant and slept on the couch for the rest of the day. Vera sat in the chair across from him and read and felt irrationally and deeply that she had done something right. Died. The relational complication arrived from a direction she had not expected. Her neighbor across the street was a woman named Delphine Acosta, 72, recently widowed, who gardened with a ferocity that suggested the beds were the only thing between her and something she did not want to think about. Vera knew this because she had watched it from her porch on a number of mornings without introducing herself, which was, she acknowledged to herself, somewhat counter to everything she had spent 34 years doing professionally. The introduction happened because of Pell. He had taken to sitting on the porch railing in the afternoons, in the sun, facing the street. This was his preferred position, and Delphine, passing one afternoon with a flat of impatience for her border planting, had stopped at the edge of the road and looked at him. "Beautiful cat," she called. "Thank you," Vera called back. Delphine stood there a moment. She was a compact woman with the kind of posture that came from decades of physical work and a face that had the particular quality of someone who had recently cried a great deal and had decided, as a matter of policy, not to do so in public again. Vera recognized that quality. She had sat across from it many times in many rooms. "I used to have a cat," Delphine said. My husband's, really. He passed in March." "I'm sorry," Vera said. "And meant it." Delphine nodded. She looked at Pell again. Pell had rotated, with a minimal adjustment of his entire body, to face her. He was watching her with his full, specific attention. "He looks like he's thinking something," Delphine said. "He usually is," Vera said. There was a pause that was not quite uncomfortable, more the quality of a threshold. Vera had spent her career recognizing thresholds. "Would you like to sit on the porch for a bit?" Vera asked. Delphine looked at the flat of impatience in her hands. "The impatience can wait," Vera said. Delphine came up the walk. She sat in the second porch chair, which Vera had bought at the furniture resale shop on Pete Ellis Drive 2 weeks before, and had told herself she bought because a porch should have 2 chairs. Pell walked the railing toward Delphine, one deliberate step at a time, and stopped within reach and allowed her to scratch behind his ear, which he accepted with his eyes half closed and his chin lifted in the manner of a dignitary graciously receiving a tribute. Delphine laughed. It was a small laugh, quick, as though it had escaped before she could evaluate whether this was the right moment for it. She looked briefly surprised by herself. "He has opinions," she said. "Constantly," Vera said. They sat for a while. The afternoon light came at that low June angle that turned the maple across the street to something almost amber, and the street was quiet except for a cyclist moving slowly through the intersection and a dog somewhere down the block making a case about something. Delphine talked about her cat. His name had been Rooster, her husband Ernesto's name for him, she said, which she had never quite understood but had stopped questioning. Rooster had died 4 months before Ernesto, which she now thought had been, in some way she could not fully articulate, a preparation. Something loosened in her when she said this. Not a performance, just a fact she had not yet said to another person in exactly that way. Vera listened without filling the spaces. This was, she understood, the thing she still knew how to do. Not the social work specifically, not the forms and the advocacy and the resource navigation, but this, the listening, the ability to sit with another person in their specific particular difficulty and not flinch from it and not try to solve it and not redirect it towards something more manageable. To simply let it be present in the air between 2 people. She had thought she was done with that. She had thought, when she retired, that the capacity for it would stay behind at the hospital with the laminate ID badge and the parking structure and the rooms with the wrong light. It had not. She was still herself. This seemed, on the porch in the late afternoon, with Delphine talking about Rooster and Pell sitting between them on the railing with his eyes half closed, a more significant thing than she had been treating it. Delphine came back the next Saturday with cuttings from her jasmine and a question about whether Vera knew anything about container gardening, which Vera did not, but she said she would find out, which she did, and the following Wednesday they planted 2 containers together on Vera's front porch, with some assistance from a library book and a great deal of confident improvisation. Pell supervised from the railing. At one point, when Delphine was pressing the soil around the second cutting and her hands were dark with potting mix, she looked up and found Pell had moved down the railing to position himself directly above her, looking down at her work with an expression of solemn appraisal. "He's judging me," Delphine said. "He's complimenting you," Vera said. "He only gets that close when he approves." Delphine looked up at Pell. Pell blinked once, slowly. "High praise," Delphine said, and patted the soil down with a satisfaction she did not try to contain. The difficulty that required the most from Vera arrived on a Thursday evening in late July, and it came from her own daughter. Prue called at 7, which meant the boys were in bed and she wanted to talk without interruption. Vera knew this pattern. She had built that pattern herself, in the years when she had been the one with children in bed and things she needed to say without them. "I want to talk to you about the library program," Prue said. "The library program." Vera waited. "They called me," Prue said. "The coordinator. She wanted to know if you'd be interested in a different kind of involvement, not just the Tuesday readings." "What kind?" "They have a partnership with the Family Resource Center on South Madison. They're looking for someone to help connect families with services, housing resources, health resources." A pause. "Social work, basically." Vera was quiet. "She said you've been exceptional with the kids. She said you listen in a way that the families notice." "It's volunteer work," Vera said. "I'm not going back to full-time anything." She's not asking for full-time. She's asking for 10 hours a week with flexibility. "Vera, Mom, she specifically asked for you. She said, there's no one else on their list with your background." The evening was settling outside the kitchen window. The street had gone quiet. In the living room, Pell had been asleep on the couch for the past hour, one paw draped over the armrest. "I'll think about it," Vera said. "You've been thinking about things," Prue said. "You've been thinking since March." "That's not true." "You planted a jasmine container. What does that have to do with—" "You've been very careful," Prue said, not unkindly. "You've been trying things out, small things to see if they work, which is fine." "That's fine, Mom. She needs an answer by Friday." Vera looked at the ceiling. The cottage ceiling had a small water stain near the light fixture that had been there since she moved in and that she had never asked Gerald about because she had decided it was old and stable and not her problem. "I'm afraid," she said. This surprised her. She had not planned to say it. Prue was quiet. "Of what?" she said carefully. Vera thought about this. The rooms in the hospital. The families in crisis. The particular weight that accumulated over 34 years of sitting with people in their worst moments and carrying a small piece of each one home without knowing you were doing it. The reserve tank. The morning after the retirement party, when she had eaten cereal for dinner because she could not think of a single thing she wanted. "Of it being the same," she said. "Of going back to something that was right for a long time and discovering that it isn't right anymore." She heard Prue breathing on the other end. "And of finding out I'm not done," Vera added. "That might be worse." "Why would that be worse?" Vera did not answer immediately. In the living room, Pell had shifted. She heard the soft adjustment, the particular sound of a cat resettling, redistributing weight. "Because then I'd have to figure out what I was doing for the past 2 years," she said. "You were resting," Prue said. "You were allowed to rest." Vera closed her eyes. She had not let herself use that word. Rest. The word that implied the work had been real and that the tiredness was proportionate and that stopping was not the same as failing. She had been using other words instead. Transition, adjustment between things, words that kept the question open and did not require her to arrive anywhere. "I'll call the coordinator tomorrow," she said. She called. She went to the meeting on Friday morning at the Family Resource Center on South Madison, which was a low brick building with a mural painted on the south wall, children and sunflowers, and several things she could not immediately identify, but that were clearly meant with great sincerity. The coordinator, a young woman named Tamasin, who had the organized competence of someone managing too much with insufficient funding and managing it well regardless, walked her through what the partnership would involve. Twice a week, families who came to the library and needed more than books, connecting them to housing advocates and health programs and the county resources that most people did not know how to find. Vera asked 4 questions. They were good questions. Tamasin answered them without condescension and without overselling. Vera said yes. She drove home and sat in the cottage kitchen and felt, for the first time since October, that the shape of her days had an architecture she had chosen rather than arrived at by default. Pell was on the counter. She had told him the counter was not his. He had not been convinced, watching her with his settled, specific attention. "Don't look so pleased with yourself," she said. He did not adjust his expression. She scratched him once, between the ears, and he pressed his head against her hand with the same directness he had used that first day on the porch step. She had not thought she wanted this. She had not been looking for it. She had been walking north on Walnut Street with a bag of asparagus and a small pot of basil and a mind full of the things she was already good at, when something had sat down 6 feet behind her on the sidewalk and waited for her to notice it was following. She thought about that now and found it, privately, a little funny. She had spent 34 years finding people who needed help, and she had not noticed, walking home with her asparagus, that the one who needed finding was herself. There was one more thing that happened in July, smaller than the others, but not smaller in the way she felt it. Her son Marcus had not called since March. This was not a rupture. There was no rupture between them, only the ordinary drift that accumulates when two people lead organized, separate lives and do not work very hard at the connective tissue. She had sent a photograph of the cottage when she moved in. He had replied with a short message that was warm in tone and brief in content. She had noted, without drama, that he had not called since. He called on a Sunday in late July. The conversation was pleasant and slightly effortful, the way conversations are when they have been postponed and neither person wants to admit how long it has been. He was fine. His work was fine. Denver was fine. He asked about Bloomington, which he had never visited. "You should come," Vera said. "Maybe in the fall." "I have a cat," she said. There was a pause. "Since when?" "Late May." "What kind?" "Brown and cream tabby." "He followed me home." "Cats don't follow people home, Mom." "This one did." She could hear him smiling without seeing it, a particular frequency in his voice that she had known since he was small. "What's his name?" "Pell." "Pell," he repeated, "like the street." She had not told him about the street. She had not known she had even mentioned the street to him. The fact that he remembered, the small bakery, the bench, the 45 minutes that had belonged entirely to herself, moved through her in a way she had not prepared for. "Yes," she said, "like the street." "I'll come in October," he said. "Good," she said. After she hung up, she sat at the kitchen table for a while. Pell came and sat in the chair across from her, the second chair at the kitchen table, the one that was always empty. He sat in it the way he sat in most places, with authority, with complete physical composure, as though the chair had been placed there for exactly this purpose. He looked at her across the table. She looked at him. The evening was coming in through the kitchen window, warm and slow, with the smell of the neighbor's honeysuckle and the sound of someone mowing a lawn 2 streets over. The particular sound of a summer evening in a Midwestern college town, when the students are mostly gone and the town breathes at its own pace for a few months, and the air has the quality of time that is not in a hurry. She was not in a hurry. For the first time in a long time. She was, she thought, right here, in this kitchen, at this table, across from a brown and cream tabby who had sat down behind her on a sidewalk in late May and declined to be ignored, and who had, in the months since, walked her past something she had been going around, installed himself on her furniture with the quiet authority of something that belonged, and sat in the chair across from her on a Sunday evening as if to confirm that the space had been waiting for exactly this. She reached across the table, not to pet him, she was too far away for that, but the gesture of it. He watched her hand. Then he stretched his broad head forward, slowly, until his nose was less than an inch from her fingers. He held that position. So did she. The start of August brought the particular humidity that settles over southern Indiana like a second skin, the kind that makes the air feel inhabited, full of itself, resistant to the idea of moving. The crabapple trees in the neighborhood had gone fully green, their small fruit hard and unripe on the branches, and the sidewalks held the heat long after the sun had moved off them. Vera began her morning walks earlier, at 6:30 instead of 7:30, while the air still had some memory of the night in it, and the streets were empty enough that she could hear her own footsteps. Pell did not follow her on these walks anymore. He came to the door when she left, sat at the threshold inside and watched her go, but he had stopped coming down the steps and waiting at the corner. Vera noticed this shift without being able to say exactly when it had happened. At some point during the previous weeks, the ritual had changed. The walks were hers now. He saw her off and waited, and when she came back and let herself in, he was at the door. She liked this arrangement. She liked, if she was honest, the knowing that he would be there. She started at the Family Resource Center on the second Tuesday in August. Thomasin had given her a small desk in the back corner of the library's community room, with a view of the parking lot that was not scenic but was functional, and a folder of intake forms and program contact sheets that Vera organized on her first morning with the automatic efficiency of someone who had spent decades making order out of paperwork. She had brought her own coffee thermos, the tall steel one that had been on her desk at Methodist for 15 years. She had not known she was going to bring it until she picked it up on her way out the door, and it was simply in her hand. The first family came in at 10 o'clock. A young mother, 2 small children, a situation involving a landlord who was not making repairs and a lease that was ambiguous about responsibility, and a level of exhaustion in the woman's eyes that Vera recognized from 34 years of a particular kind of room. Not defeat, something more functional than defeat, the tactical tiredness of someone managing a problem that was too large for one person, one day at a time. Vera listened. She asked 4 questions. She pulled 3 contact sheets from the folder and explained each one clearly, without making the woman feel she was being processed. The woman thanked her with the particular force of someone who had not recently been heard in a way that felt like enough. Vera drove home at noon with the thermos on the passenger seat and the folder in her bag, and a feeling in her chest that she did not try to name, not because she did not know what it was, but because naming it felt, after so long, almost too easy. Pell was on the porch railing when she pulled into the driveway. He had heard the car. He was facing the driveway, his body oriented toward her arrival, his tail hanging loose over the side of the railing. When she got out and came up the walk, he tracked her with his full attention, and when she reached the porch steps, he walked the railing toward her and stopped at its end, where it met the porch post, and waited. She reached up and scratched him once, firmly, at the base of his ears, which he received with his eyes closing and his chin lifting in that dignitary manner. "Good morning," she said, although it was no longer morning. He stepped down from the railing onto the porch and walked ahead of her to the door, where he sat and looked back at her over his shoulder. She unlocked the door. They went in together. Delphine came over that evening, as she had been doing 2 or 3 times a week since the afternoon with the impatiens. She brought a bottle of iced tea and 2 glasses, and they sat on the porch while the neighborhood settled into the early dark, the fireflies beginning their low, intermittent signaling in the grass and along the hedge. Delphine had been talking over the last several weeks about something she had been building toward. Vera could hear it the way she heard most things, not in the content specifically, but in the shape of the conversation, the way certain subjects got approached and then redirected, approached again, redirected again, the circling that meant a person was deciding whether to say the thing they had actually come to say. Tonight, Delphine said it. "Ernesto's sister wants me to sell the house," she said. "She thinks the market is right and the house is too large for one person and I should move closer to her family in Fort Wayne." Vera waited. "She's not wrong about the house," Delphine said. "It is too large. I rattle around in it." She paused. "But I planted those beds. I planted every one of them. It took me 6 years to get the back border right." Pell was between them on the railing, turned outward toward the yard, watching the fireflies with a focused and aspirational attention that was clearly not going anywhere productive. "What do you want?" Vera asked. Delphine looked at her. "I want to stay," she said. Quiet. Certain. I just needed someone to ask. Vera held that for a moment. The simplicity of it. The years she had spent asking that question in rooms with worse light, and here it was on her own porch on a Tuesday evening, serving the same purpose it had always served. "Then stay," Vera said. Delphine looked out at the yard. The fireflies moved through the dark in their patient, random pattern. "I'll call Ernesto's sister in the morning," she said. "Good," Vera said. They drank their iced tea and did not say much else for a while, and it was enough. That's it. Marcus came in October, as he had said he would. He drove from Indianapolis on a Saturday morning, arriving just after 10, and stood on the front porch of the cottage with his bag over one shoulder and the look of a man who had not been sure what to expect and was now recalibrating. Vera had cleaned the cottage the day before and had made the guest room ready, and had also, without deciding to, set the kitchen table with the good cloth rather than the everyday one. which she had not done for any occasion since the retirement party. Pell was on the couch. Marcus came in, set his bag down, looked at the couch and said, "Huh, that's Pell," Vera said. "He's larger than I pictured. He's well fed." Pell had turned to face Marcus with the measured assessment he applied to newcomers. He did not retreat. He did not perform. He simply looked at Marcus the way he looked at most things, with the patience of a creature that already knew what it thought and was waiting to see if the new information would change anything. Marcus sat down in the armchair near the window and looked back at the cat. Vera went to the kitchen. She heard nothing for several minutes, no voices, no movement. She let it be. When she came back with 2 cups of coffee, Marcus was on the couch, not at the far end, not at the middle. He had sat down with the particular self-consciousness of a large man settling onto a small couch at Pell's end, leaving a polite distance between them. Pell had not moved. They were both looking at the window. Vera set the coffee down and did not say anything about it. "Oh, he doesn't do much," Marcus observed after a moment. "He does a great deal," Vera said. "It's just not always visible." Marcus looked at her. "That's a very social worker thing to say about a cat," he said. She almost laughed. She did laugh. It came out the way things come when they have been waiting in a closed room for a while, a little faster and louder than expected, real in a way that startled her slightly. Marcus was smiling. The particular smile that was the same smile he had made at 7 years old and at 42 years old and at every age between, the one that appeared when he was pleased and did not have a better way to show it. Pell turned from the window and looked at both of them. His tail swept once, slowly, across the couch cushion. That afternoon, they walked through the campus arboretum, following the path Vera now walked 3 or 4 times a week, past the buckeye trees and the labeled plantings and the fountain in the quad that was turned off for the season but held a shallow pool in which the sky was perfectly reflected, a square of cloud and blue. She told him about Tamasin and the family resource center. She told him about Delphine and Ernesto and the garden with the beds that had taken 6 years to get right. She told him about Gerald and the bees and the motion-activated sprinkler, which made him laugh in the same way she had laughed on the couch, surprised, specific, real. She told him about the walk in June, the one where she had come this way for the first time and stood on the path near the medical science building and stood still for a while and then kept walking. He listened the way she had taught him to listen, without filling the spaces. "I didn't know how to stop," she said. "I knew it was time. I knew I had used up the right kind of energy for it. But I didn't know how to stop being the person who does that work and be some other kind of person instead." She watched the fountain pool for a moment, the sky in the water. "I think I thought they were the same thing, the work and the person. Aren't they?" Marcus said. "Not exactly," she said. "The work was what I did. The person is what I am." She paused. "There's a difference. I just needed a little time to find it again." Marcus was quiet. "The cat helped," he said. Not a question. "The cat was very clear about what he wanted," she said. "At a time when I wasn't." They walked on. The October light came through the buckeyes at an angle, catching the first of the color turning at the edges of the leaves. Not the full fall yet, but the beginning of it, the place where the green starts to warm towards something else. Marcus had his hands in his jacket pockets and was looking at the path ahead. "I should have called more," he said. Vera considered several responses. She set them aside. "You're here now," she said. He nodded. She put her hand briefly through his arm, the way she had done when he was young and they were crossing streets together, and then she let it go, and they walked the rest of the way through the arboretum in the ordinary, comfortable quiet of people who understand each other well enough not to fill every moment with words. Marcus left on Sunday afternoon. He hugged her at the door with more intention than he usually hugged, the kind of hug that says something that did not get said in words, and she held it for a moment before letting him go. He stopped on the front walk and looked back at the porch. Pell was on the railing. "He's going to watch me all the way to the car, isn't he?" Marcus said. "Almost certainly," Vera said. Marcus picked up his bag. He walked to the car. He opened the door, put the bag in, and turned back before getting in. Pell was still watching him, motionless on the railing. Tail down, the full specific attention. Marcus raised one hand. He was not sure who he was waving at. He got in the car anyway, and Vera watched him go from the porch, and Pell watched him go from the railing, and the car turned at the corner and was gone. The street was quiet. The maple across the road had gone amber now, fully into October, and a few leaves were coming down in the windless afternoon with the slow, certain drift of things that have reached the right moment. Vera sat down in her porch chair. Pell walked the railing toward her and stepped down onto the armrest, and then, carefully, into her lap, which he had not done before. He was heavy and warm, and he turned once and settled with his chin on his front paws, facing the street, watching the maple and the slow leaves and the neighborhood going about its Sunday afternoon. She placed her hand on his back. He breathed. She breathed. The jasmine cuttings on the porch had taken root. The containers were full and trailing now, spilling over the edge in the way that jasmine does when it has decided a place belongs to it. They would not bloom until spring. Vera did not mind waiting. November came with the particular quality that belongs to late autumn in a Midwestern college town, the semester deep in its middle, the light shortening at both ends of the day, the mornings carrying the first real cold off the fields to the north. The farmer's market closed for the season. The dogwood in the backyard had gone bare. The bees were settled deep in Gerald's hive boxes for the winter, and Gerald himself had taken to leaving a small jar of honey at Vera's door every few weeks, without note, which was a language she recognized and appreciated. She walked every morning. The route took her past the campus and through the arboretum now, 4 times a week, because it was the right distance and the right direction, and because she had stopped finding reasons to go the other way. Tuesdays and Thursdays, she was at the Family Resource Center. The families came. She listened. She found the right contacts and the right words and the right question, always the same question, in different forms. What do you need and what do you want? And are those the same thing? Sometimes they were, often they were not. The difference between them was almost always where the real difficulty lived. She was good at this. She was still good at it. This no longer surprised her the way it had in August. Delphine's sister-in-law came to Bloomington in mid-November, stayed 3 days, and returned to Fort Wayne without the outcome she had intended. Delphine told Vera about it on the porch, over coffee this time, with their jackets on against the cold. "She thinks I'm being stubborn," Delphine said. "Are you?" Delphine considered this. "I'm being clear," she said. "There's a difference." "There is," Vera agreed. Pell was at the window behind them, the living room window that faced the porch, watching them through the glass with the particular quality of an observer who has heard all the relevant information and is waiting for the humans to catch up with what they already know. Delphine looked at him through the glass. "He always does that," she said. "Listens." "He's attentive," Vera said. Ernesto's cat was like that. Delphine was quiet for a moment, looking at the glass, and Pell looked back at her without moving. Rooster would sit in the doorway when we argued. Ernesto and I never came in, just sat in the doorway and waited for it to be over. She smiled at the memory, a real smile, brief and without weight. "We always felt slightly judged." "Were you?" "Probably," Delphine said. "Probably we deserved it." They both laughed. The cold morning took the sound of it and held it for a moment above the porch, over the dormant jasmine in the containers, over the street with its bare trees. Pell held very still at the window. Then he stepped back from the glass, turned, and disappeared into the house. The last thing that changed was the quietest. In December, Vera moved her desk. Not her work desk at the resource center, that stayed where it was. Her desk at home, the one in the small second bedroom that she had been using as a study. She had kept it against the wall facing the door, the way she had arranged her desk at the hospital, positioned to see the entrance, to be ready for whoever came in. It was a professional posture that she had carried home without noticing. She moved it to face the window. The window looked out on the backyard, on the bare dogwood, on Gerald's hive boxes along the south fence, on the December sky above the roofline of the houses on the next street. Nothing particularly notable happened when she sat at it the first time. The view was not dramatic. The sky was the flat gray of a Midwestern December, carrying the low promise of snow that had not yet arrived. The dogwood branches were thin and dark against it. Pell jumped onto the desk. He walked to the far corner, turned twice, and settled with his back to her, facing the window. His tail hung over the edge. His ears were forward, reading the yard. Vera opened the notebook she used for tracking families and contacts and notes from her Tuesday and Thursday sessions. She uncapped her pen. She was not sure what made her do the next thing. She turned to the back of the notebook, to the blank pages she had not yet used, and she wrote in her clean, deliberate hand, not a note or a contact or a resource. She wrote a sentence. It was not addressed to anyone. It was not the beginning of anything specific. It was just a thing she had been thinking, without knowing she was thinking it for a long time. She wrote, "I thought I was between things. I wasn't. I was arriving." She looked at it for a moment. Pell did not look back. He was watching the yard, the hive boxes, the bare branches of the dogwood, the grey sky above everything. His tail swept once, slow and complete, the full arc, and then settled again, hanging loose over the edge of the desk. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, not heavily. The small, exploratory flakes of early December, not yet committed to anything. They came down through the still air and landed on the dark branches of the dogwood and did not accumulate, not yet, just touched and held for a moment, and then were gone. Pell watched them. His tail was completely still. His ears moved, one, then the other, reading the yard, reading the cold, reading whatever a cat reads in the falling of the first snow. Vera watched him watch it. She did not write anything else.